Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day as we begin this very holy period of Holy Week, and we seek to lead our lives that glorify your name, and we ask you to lead us closer to you, especially during this week as we go from Monday of Holy Week all the way through Easter Sunday. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Well, today the gospel is one of the most unique gospels, I think, well, in a sense, only because it has a unique passage in it. It's actually only one line. It's John 12:1-10. And what's happening here is it is now 6 days before Passover. So it is the week, just like we're at, the week before the death and resurrection of Jesus. And what's happening is that there is a dinner going on, and among the people who are there are Lazarus, who was raised from the dead. Now, let me play a little bit of my homily from a week ago that illustrates exactly how important that moment was.
When he raises Lazarus, he makes an intensely powerful statement to everyone by that action. He is the Lord of life. And by making that statement, he's making it very clear. This isn't just about Lazarus. He is showing everyone that he is the Lord of life over death, which he will eventually conquer in a short amount of time. And by doing that, he also splits his followers and detractors right in half. Those who are on the fence choose one side or the other. Those who now embrace him even more, and those who reject him even more. He splits them right down the middle, as he said he would. He says, I haven't come for peace, but I've come for division.
So now we see in today's gospel that this is really being highlighted. And so important is the fact that the Pharisees have also planned to kill Lazarus too, because, as I said in my homily, people are now coming more deeply to Christ because they saw that he raised Lazarus from the dead. And I always bring up on this day, how evil do you have to be in order to decide to kill someone who was raised from the dead? Now, Jesus gives a foreshadowing to this a long time ago when we see in Luke, he talks about the rich man and Lazarus. And remember, the rich man is there on the other side of the chasm. He's suffering in fire. And what does he say to Abraham? He asks him if he can go back to his brothers and teach them the truth. And Abraham says they have the Moses and the commandments and the law. And what does the man say? Yes, but if someone goes back from the dead and warns them, they will listen. He says, no. Even if someone goes back from the dead and warns them, they will not listen. He's giving a foreshadowing of this reality of the Pharisees. The Pharisees are lost in their intense desire to see the death of Jesus. They're now lost. And so they're lost in their thinking, and they're so lost in their thinking, they're actually planning to kill Lazarus, who was raised from the dead by Jesus. Now, understand that there is a commandment against killing, but they're lost in their thinking, and they're lost so much. These are the Pharisees. These are the people who were considered the devout of the time. And as I've just said about 3 times, they're lost in their thinking. So I want to give you that as a warning. How easy is it to get lost in your thinking if you have no connection to God whatsoever, if the Pharisees got lost in their thinking and they have a connection to God? And this is something we see in our world all the time when people are walking down a disastrous path. And you kind of have to look at them and say, what were you thinking? And they're walking down a disastrous path, but why? Because they got lost in their thinking. And this is something that clearly we see with the Pharisees. Now, throughout the entire week, one of the things you're going to notice is the Pharisees get more hard-hearted every step of the way. So now they have just turned absolutely nasty. They have turned absolutely evil. And this is what they're doing in the interest of their mission. What is their mission lost into? It's lost into two things. One is the idea that the ends justify the means. Now, I don't know if anyone actually said that at the time, because that actually is something that we understand comes from The Prince by Machiavelli, who taught that the ends justify the means. We see that a lot in political circles, too. As a matter of fact, I wrote an article of how that became the defining point of Pol Pot's regime in Cambodia. The ends justify the regime. The ends justify the means. And so in the regime, you had people who, after all of the killing fields happened and everything else, they were on trial. And they actually thought through that they believed that despite they were doing absolutely evil things, they believed that ultimately this would bring forth utopia. They got lost in their thinking. And of course, we all know that exactly the opposite happened. Because, you know, as Jesus says, you cannot bring good fruit from a bad tree. And you can't bring a utopia from bad thinking. But here's where they're going. They're lost in their thinking. We're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to St. Anthony Overnight from St. Anthony Parish in Alston, Massachusetts, right here on WEZE and at CatholicAudiomedia.com. We'll be right back. Have you told anyone else about St. Anthony Overnight from St. Anthony Parish in Alston, Massachusetts, here on WEZE in the early morning and through CatholicAudiomedia.com?
You realize we are a different Catholic program because we are not speaking just to Catholics.
We speak to ex-Catholics, atheists, evangelicals, and people from all different religious and non-religious backgrounds. We do this from a Catholic perspective.
So you're not going to hear what you hear on other programs because we have a different mission serving Jesus Christ.
Tell your friends what we do here is different, and it is so that we all may experience Jesus, who sets us all free. And don't forget our own website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. And everything you need to know about us is over there. And don't forget, it connects to the parish, St. Anthony in Alston, stanthonyalston.org if you want to get there directly. So this is a powerful point. And now we look at the Pharisees who are at this, who are looking at this dinner, and they're making their plots because they absolutely have to remove Jesus. Now, what is the reason why they are doing this? Well, there's several reasons behind this, and it needs to be understood. First of all, they believe he's challenging their authority. That's number one. Second, which is also important here, is they're terrified of the Romans. They believe that what's going to happen is if they don't stop Jesus, the Romans are going to come in and they're going to wipe out the entire Jewish state, which ultimately they do about 40 years later. As a matter of fact, I've been reading Dennis Prager's Rational Bible series, and I just finished the one on Deuteronomy. I guess he's finally working on the one on Leviticus, and I've been looking forward to that since day one. And I don't know if I'll pronounce this right, and the Haggadah, the Rational Bible series, the Haggadah, which is actually the whole story about what Passover is all about. And he makes an interesting point that, you know, it may or may not sound encouraging, but he said that the Jews prayed for 1,900 years that they would get back to their land. And, well, they prayed and prayed and prayed that they would get back to their land. And after 1,900 years, that prayer was finally granted. And, of course, that happened in 1948. So he talks about that. But that actually is 1948, which follows 70 A.D., in which the temple was destroyed and the political state that at the time was Judah was wiped off the face of the map. Obviously, the land wasn't, but the political state, and it didn't exist again until 1948. So that connection is there, and that's what they're afraid of happening, but it happens 40 years later anyway. And they're trying to prevent this absolute disaster and all of this, but they're in their own way of thinking, and in their own way of thinking, they're saying we're not going to allow this challenge to happen, so we have to eliminate it. And the way we're going to eliminate it is basically by violating a commandment. They're going to have him executed on trumped-up charges, and they even plan to kill Lazarus. So they're lost in their thinking. And this is one of the important things that you do when you are seeking to live the gospel and live the teachings of the church, the teachings of the gospel, the teachings of Christ. What you're doing is, if you're humble before the Lord and allow the Lord to guide you, what you're doing is you're showing a sign out of this lost thinking. Without that, you can see that we fall into a violent anarchy. You can see that. And this is what the Lord is leading us always away from. And therefore, understanding that, you can realize the importance of what you do. Next time you turn around and say, I don't have to go to church because I'm good enough. Yeah, but you weren't called to be good enough. You were called to be a sign to others. Yes, you do have to go to church. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a blessed day. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out catholictv.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at catholicaudiomedia.com. That's catholicaudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at catholicaudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at catholicaudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.